Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the illustrious career of San Jose Sharks legend Patrick Marleau, Mr. San Jose Sharks himself. It was just a few months ago when he announced his retirement from the NHL, and it was just a couple of days ago when the Sharks organization announced that they would be retiring Patrick Marleau's number, and he would become the first ever Sharks player to have his number raised into the rafters of the Sharks arena, number 12, never to be worn again by a San Jose Sharks player, and no one is more deserving of this honor than Patrick Marleau. He really just defined what it was to be a San Jose Sharks player for so long. The Sharks have only been in the NHL for about 31 years at this point, and Marleau has been there for about 2/3 of that. Drafted in the 1997 entry draft, second overall, just behind, funnily enough, Joe Thornton, who would also become a mainstay of the San Jose Sharks in about 2005 when he would get traded from the Boston Bruins. And Marleau immediately came in the NHL and started doing what he did best, which was producing. He didn't blow the roof off the place. He never really was throughout his entire career a superstar, amazing 100-point type of player, but you could always rely on him to be extremely consistent. Come in, he could put up 70 points, 80 points at times throughout the better points of his career, and just generally be an extremely strong player. He even at one point earned the amazing honor of being chosen to represent Team Canada at the Olympics, which is insanely difficult to do. I mean, just look at it right now, some of the projected lineups that people have for a Team Canada roster at the Olympics, and you'll see just how star-studded it is with players like Patrice Bergeron or something along those lines on like the fourth line of that team because of just how stacked it is up front. So the fact that Marleau managed to make it is a testament to just how good he was back in his prime, because a lot of the newer Sharks fans might not be super familiar with Marleau. He was here for the last couple of years of his career, 2021 and 1920, but he was obviously at that time at like age 40 wasn't super amazing, and prior to that he spent a couple of years with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So really, besides these last two seasons, the last time he was on the San Jose Sharks was back in 16-17. So if you only started following the Sharks recently, you might not know too much about Patrick Marleau, but he really was a fantastic player. As we take a look at his all-time stats here, 1,779 games played all-time. That is good for first all-time. He's the player who has played the most games ever, not just as a San Jose Shark, but in the NHL through his 100-plus year history. He played more than the all-time greats, Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Orr, Gordie Howe, of course, who he had just recently passed. And it is an incredible testament to his longevity as a player, not just in avoiding injuries, because that is a bit of an element of luck to that, but also how he managed to remain such a consistent player that he was constantly earning a lineup spot game in and game out. Yes, that kind of fell off a bit in his last season in 2021. There were certainly times where he probably wasn't super deserving of a spot in the lineup, and yet he was given one so that he could break this record. But throughout the 20 plus other seasons that he did play, he was always a fantastic option for the coaching staff to look at, because he was always good, whether he was on the first line or down on the third or even fourth line. Patrick Marleau would produce. 566 goals, that's good for 23rd all-time, extremely impressive, obviously. 631 assists, that's 81st, and you may be looking at that and thinking 81st doesn't seem all that high, but remember, this is 81st all-time. There have been thousands upon thousands of players who have played NHL games. I mean, just taking a look at going into next season, there are 32 teams in the league. Each team will have 23 players just on their roster. That is 736 unique NHL players next season, and this league has been around for over 100 years. You can imagine the thousands of players who have played at the very least one game in the NHL, and out of all of them, Marleau finds himself 81st. Still amazingly impressive. And his 1,197 points also finds him there right in the top 50 in terms of points all time. In terms of the career highs, like I mentioned, Marleau was never the superstar elite winning every single possible award at the NHL level, but he was still having some fantastic high highs. 82 games played, like I mentioned, his longevity was a big thing. He managed to play full seasons in the NHL 14 times throughout his career, and many of the other seasons were seasons like 81 games or 80 games that I technically couldn't include in this stat, but basically he never really missed more than a very small handful of games in any particular season. 44 goals was his career high back in the 09-10 season. That put him fourth in terms of the entire league in goal scoring. 52 assists back in the 05-06 season, as well as 86 points in that very same year. That was, of course, the year that Joe Thornton came over and generally kind of helped out most of the Sharks roster in terms of goals, assists, and points, just because Thornton led the league in terms of points that year. So Marleau, fantastic player. Always good to be a strong first liner, I should say, obviously, and was just a fantastic San Jose Shark for so long. In terms of some of the memorable moments he had, I mean, there is so many, and I don't even have to look these up to find them because they are, burned into my memory, even though I've only been watching him for about half of his career from the 09-10 season. I remember his game winners against the Detroit Red Wings in the 09-10 playoff series. He had that intense overtime game winner in Game 3, as well as the third period game winner in Game 5 of that series. I remember his overtime game winner to complete the first ever sweep in San Jose Sharks history in 12-13 against the Vancouver Canucks in Game 4. I remember his amazing natural hat trick in just the third period of that game back in the 16-17 season against the Avalanche, which also included a fourth goal in that very same period to give the San Jose Sharks that victory. He generally had so many amazing moments. I remember the 12-13 season, the beginning of that one, Marleau scored 2 goals in each of the first 4 games of that season. Usually there will be a player who has like a very strong first game, or maybe first couple of games they'll have like 5 points in 2 games, and then people will make the joke like, this guy is on pace for like 200 points over this season. Marleau managed to sustain a 164 goal pace for not just 1 or 2 games, but for 4 games. Incredibly impressive. And that's just how good Marleau could be when he was on. He wasn't always on, but when he was, he seemed to be just an absolutely unstoppable player. So fantastic career for Marleau. Like I said, nobody else more deserving to be the first number retired. He was sort of a synonym to the San Jose Sharks for so long. Yes, there was that brief stint in Toronto, but that definitely doesn't take anything away from Mr. San Jose Shark himself. Class dismissed.